I know doing this is a little different. Teaching Sunday school class, you get up here and okay, you've got 12 or 14 verses, you got 25, 35 minutes, something like that to go on it, but try to cover a whole book of the Bible and something like right there is not something I'm used to doing, so it's a little different for me tonight, so y'all just bear with me as we go through this. We are going to do the survey of Joshua. We're going to do the overview of it and things. Does everybody have their sheet, handout, and everything on it? So everybody can follow along? Okay. Book of Joshua covers quite a bit and everything else. In the first few chapters, there's quite a few things that would be considered miracles and stuff that sometimes we kind of forget that happened and things. But it is a big transition. We're transitioning from where Moses is leading the people in the wilderness and everything else to where he's brought them to right there beside the Jordan River and everything else. And now he dies and he turns everything over to Joshua. So Joshua's taking command now, and we'll get into that. And that's in the first chapter there and everything else. But it makes a decisive transition from the wilderness generation to the conquest and settlement of the promised land. So the people are going through changes. They're going to be going from, for 40 years there, they weren't fighting battles and stuff like there, but now here they are, they're getting ready to go into battles. They're going to be fighting constantly. They're going to be in the battles of wars, taking over cities and conquering land and things. So it's getting ready to be a big change for them. The book of Joshua is named after its principal figure, Joshua, the son of Nun. It's Moses' faithful servant and assistant and successor. And the book tells us that Yahweh fulfills his ancient promise to Abraham. That's what's getting ready to happen here. He says, to your seed I will give this land. And that goes back to Genesis 12:7. So after 40 years of them wandering due to unbelief and at different times they turn against God and don't follow the rules and the covenant and everything He's given them and everything, they have to travel for 40 years. And we have to remember one of the years they're traveling for 40 years is all those that were disobedient and fell in unbelief or whatever else is waiting for them to die out and everything else so the younger generation would come up. And they would be the ones that would go into the promised land. So all their unbelief caused that generation to have to pass away. But under Joshua's leadership, he's going to carry them across the Jordan. They're going to conquer several good strongholds in Canaan land. And he's going to divide the land up into the inheritance of the 12 tribes. So theologically here, Joshua shows in this book here the faithfulness of Yahweh to his covenant word. And God is sitting here telling him Yahweh's telling him, Yahweh gave. And that's telling us right there whatever else. We think all these battles and everything they're going into and everything else. You sit there and say, Israel is victorious in this right here, but Israel didn't win the victories. All the battles and everything they get into, they didn't win them on their own. It was not the power of man that won these victories. It was the power of God. And the fear of God that was put into the people of Canaan when they heard of what God was doing to the Israelite people as he brought them across. Let them cross on dry land. Okay, none of their gods that they had ever worshiped or whatever else could ever say that they had ever done anything for them, done something like that miraculous for them like right there. So they know that this God here is powerful, so it already starts throwing the fear into them and everything else. Victory comes not by military prowess from them, but Yahweh's mighty acts, where he's crossing the Jordan River on dry land. We get into it later where the walls of Jericho fall. This is one of the ones that I'd kind of forgot about or whatever else, when the sun stands still for almost a day. So they can chase into battle and everything else. They can chase down their enemies and just totally destroy them and wipe them out and everything else. So that's something. And during that same time as they're chasing these enemies away and they're chasing them through several different towns and stuff like that there, God sends down giant hailstones. And the hailstones actually kill more men than the Israelites did by sword. And you're sitting there kind of thinking, well, they're in battle, they're fighting. But there again, we're saying it's not a battle won by man. This is a battle won by God. God shows his power to these people yet again, and through it, that word will spread throughout the whole land what the God of Israel is capable of. He's more powerful and capable of any other God from all these other lands, that's coming in here, these false gods that they're worshiping and stuff at the time. So he's sending terror. He's scaring all their enemies as well. So when they come upon them and everything else, some of them are afraid to fight and things. But this book also, Joshua tells us about the other things. It's more realistic. The conquest is partial. They do not do exactly what God tells them to do. He tells them to go in there and take the land and push out all the inhabitants, does he not? But what do? They don't do that, right? They conquer a city and they end up taking people as servants and things of that nature right there. They're not pushing the inhabitants out. So there's the door open. That's against what God's told them to do. The door is open for those people to start influencing them with their false gods and everything else. So they have to be completely obedient to God, or it's going to lead to future troubles. From biblical times when this happened all the way up to today. Them not following God back then has caused a lot of problems they're still dealing with today. They're still not following God, and they still didn't do And so they're paying for all that up until this time now. Joshua ends again by reminding them of the covenant that God had with Israel and everything else. He's trying to remind them that Yahweh requires loyalty. He requires their respect. He requires their praise to him, to worship him and to follow him, and not to worship any other gods. And Joshua will end up there, and he says, and it will seem evil unto you to serve the Lord. Choose you this day whom you will serve. That still fits us today. Who are we going to serve? Are we going to serve the world, or are we going to serve God? Which one are we going to follow? So these words were written thousands of years ago, but it's still pertinent to us today. Who are we going to follow? Whether the gods of your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you do dwell. But here's the part we all heard and we all know. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. He's sitting there reminding them, who has brought us through all these trials, all these tribulations, all these battles and everything else? It's our God. It's Yahweh. He's done all this for us. It's not some of these false gods and these little idols and things and whatever else that some of the people were conquering or worshiping. They've done nothing for you. And I'll tell you right now that Joshua, going through all this right here, that he was indeed a great man of tremendous faith. He had to have faith to sit there and take this on. Can you imagine that, being like an apprentice to Moses or whatever else, and all of a sudden you're responsible for hundreds of thousands of people, leading them into a land that God's telling you to conquer and everything else? But God told him several times in the first couple of chapters here, be not afraid. I am with you. I will lead you through this. I have given you this land, and I will give you these places, and you will conquer them. They will not stand against us. He had tremendous faith, he had courage, and he had leadership ability. Can you imagine having to stand up and lead all these people, these thousands of people here that had been rebellious for 40 years? You know these people. It's not like they're strangers to you. You're going to have to lead these people that you know and have been rebellious for all these years, have turned against God, and you're put in that position. And Caleb at this time here is, he's about 80 years old. He was about 40 when they came out of Egypt, and now at this time right here, they're saying he's somewhere between 75, 80 years old. I've seen different accounts and stuff like that there. So he's not a young man when he's put in this position to start taking this over and things. But some of the things we're going to cover tonight is some of the themes is Yahweh's faithfulness to his promises. Here he is, hundreds of years later, he's fulfilling the promise to Abraham that his seed will come in and inherit this land, the promised land. And obedience is the path to blessings. Well, they already found that out during the 40 years. When they were obeying God, things were great for them, right? When they disobeyed God and they turned to other idols and they turned against God, things fell apart for them. And that's the reason they had to keep wondering and wondering and wondering. They never did. They should have been able to get there, in a short period of time. One of the other things is the holy war and Yahweh's sovereignty. Conquest of Yahweh's judgment on Canaan is iniquity. It's like Sodom and Gomorrah. Those people there practiced bestiality, child sacrifices, everything else. They had turned their back on God. They did not accept God as who he was, as sovereign God of the universe. So he's using the Israelites here to go in and wipe these people out that are so ungodly and everything else. He's using them for that purpose. And it's also at the same time, he's showing these people and showing the Israelites how powerful he is, that he's walking in, he's doing all these things for them, taking this land for them. We'll see faith of outsiders, Rahab the Canaanite, and everything else. When the spies are sent in, she keeps two of them hid and keeps them safe from the king's men as they come after them and stuff. She tells them that they have escaped and stuff. So there's different things there. She and the city of the Gibeonites, they lived in the city there, they're spared because they turned to God in faith. All these others had that choice, but they did not turn to God and everything else, so they had to be destroyed. But these people here, Rahab, and we know Rahab is very important, that she did accept that order. It goes down through the lineage of David and down through the lineage of Jesus himself. So it's very important that comes into it. This also foreshadows that Christ is going to be offered to the Gentiles. This is being offered to people outside of the Jewish faith and the Jewish people and everything else. So this is showing that sometime later that the Gentiles will be included as well. We'll look at some covenant loyalty. Joshua's final charge echoes Deuteronomy, where exclusive devotion to Yahweh alone. There should have no other idols, no other gods before me and everything else. So this goes back, and it goes back to that. It ends up with unfinished work. They're still enemies. They're still unconquered territory that they do not go after and everything else. So they're leaving it open. They're leaving themselves open. And things, they had 7 years where they tried to conquer the land and everything else, but they didn't do exactly what God had asked them to do, and provided each one. Like if you go back to Deuteronomy, it tells them to go into some of these cities, utterly destroy them. Do not leave a stone standing. And in some of these situations or whatever else, they might have destroyed the towns, but they didn't destroy the people and stuff. So they're partially listening to God. And I know what happens to me when I don't listen to God and I try to take it out upon my own. I end up in a ditch somewhere. I end up in trouble and everything else. Well, that's exactly what was happening here. The people were not listening to God and everything. So that goes forward to us as well. When we don't listen to God, bad things are going to happen to us. And we'll see one of the people here that I'll talk about tonight, how his sin not only affected him, but it affected all the Israelites, and how his sin caused them to lose a battle, and it had a huge impact on people. And then what God's answer was and how he handled that with him. I'll go back now and expound on some of the different chapters and everything. In chapter 1, Moses died, and Joshua is called to lead the people into the promised land. God assures Joshua that they will enter the land, that no man shall be able to stand against them. He's given him promises. He's telling him, and as we always say, God has never fallen on keeping any of his promises. So Joshua has got this right here. God has given him this promise that no man will stand against you, that will be able to stand against you. And Joshua is told repeatedly to be strong and of good courage as well. God is telling him, I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you to stand up, be of good courage, that you will not fail. God will not fail him. And Joshua is having here at the end of this chapter 1, where Joshua is telling the people that within 3 days or whatever else, they need to get their provisions ready because they're getting ready to cross over to Jordan. And, they sat there, some of these people were there when they crossed over the Red Sea, and they're sitting there, well, how are we going to get over this river? And they weren't thinking about it was going to be parted again like the Red Sea. I don't think they were expecting another miracle. But as we go into chapter 2, that's exactly what happens and everything else. But before they cross over, Joshua sends 2 men into the land there to spy, and they end up in Jericho, and that's when they run into Rahab. This is reminiscent of going back to when Moses sent 2 groups of 12 men in there, 2 groups each, in each group, out to spy on the land. And remember who came back and said that they could take the land? It was Joshua and Caleb, right? And I think the preacher's got like a little fun note on there about Caleb and everything else. He was not born a Jew. He was converted and stuff. He was the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite. And this links in back to the Kenizzite people, a group mentioned amongst the inhabitants of Canaan to begin with in Genesis. And they're associated with the Edomite lineage, which goes back to tie them with Esau rather than with Jacob. So it gives you a little bit of history right there. This is the same Caleb we're talking about here. Him and Joshua were the only 2 out of these spies that went into the land, came back and said, yes, we can take them. There are some giants. There's big people in this land, and there's armies and stuff like it there. But they were the only ones that had faith in God, that God had given to begin with, just like he told Joshua, I will be with you. Be strong and of good courage. So they sat there, and they believed that. The other 10 men that went out in those groups didn't have enough faith in God in that promise he'd give them that they were going to give them the land and everything else. They were worried about the armies they saw. As we were saying a while ago, it's not man's victory, it's God's victory. They were worried about if themselves as man could come in here and overtake this land. There's many things I feel like I can't do it myself. I know the only reason I was able to do it is because God did, just like me standing here speaking tonight. I couldn't do it on my own. God's given me the courage to get up here because I get nervous when I do stuff. But, God gives us the courage and the strength to go out and do things. It gets us out of our comfort level and stuff. We just have to have faith. Well, Caleb and Joshua were the only ones that had faith. But here, Joshua sends 2 men, the spies, in. They meet Rahab, and she hides them from the king. When they come asking about them, whatever else, she's got them hidden on the roof, right, under some stalks. I can't remember what it was exactly, but she had them hid on the roof. And so she told them that the men had left, and so they go off after them. When they leave, the men go back out. They come back to Joshua and everything else, and they tell them, we can take this. This is a good land that we can come back and we can take this land. And so that's exactly what they did. These 2 young men here as well that were there, they had courage. Rahab sat there, and after they talked to him and everything, she tells them that she knows, I've heard of what your God is capable of. She said, I believe in him. I know that he's in the heaven above and the earth below. So she's saying and showing them that she has faith and that she believes in the same God they do. And what does she ask? That her family and all of her household will be spared when the military comes in. She knows exactly what's getting ready to happen. She knows the Israelites are getting ready to come in and wipe the city out. So she's asking, she believes in God, and she wants for that. That's kind of like us. We know we're sinners. We know that death is approaching. Death is sitting out there waiting for us. We have to acknowledge that God's our Savior. We have to accept him as who he is and ask for forgiveness, right? That's basically what she's asking. She's asking for her household to be forgiven. That's what we have to do. We have to ask for forgiveness from God as well so we can have salvation. Chapter 3 goes into a little bit where Joshua has the priest to bear the Ark of the Covenant and step into the river. All the people were prepared now to cross. This is something I got a little bit confused about earlier when I was reading this and stuff. It kind of confused me a little bit. I know when I look at chapter 1, like verse 14, it says the men prepared and everything else, and like 40,000 fighting men crossed over, but it had told that the ladies and children and the livestock would be left behind. But over in chapter 3, as we get there and everything, it says all of the people, all of Israel crossed over the river and everything else. But when you first start reading it, well, it told them to stay them behind, but they were getting the preparation and everything else for all their stuff to cross over the river. So it's not a contradiction. It does go back and it explains that it's all the people going over together. And as they cross over the water, it's just, you know how the sea split and opened up and everything else. But here, the river did not keep flowing. Quit flowing. When it was parted and everything, it said the water just started backing up, and stacking up. So the water kept getting higher and higher and higher above it and everything else. But they walked across on dry land, and the priests were standing in the middle of the river with the Ark of Covenant, and it kept the water parted for them to go across. That's a miracle that God just shows for them right there. This is who I am. I am the master over the environment, over earth, over everything there is. I'm taking you across here. So this promise, if I can do this, I can take you through these people here and turn this land over to you as I had promised before. Go on into chapter 4. God commanded Joshua to have 12 men take 12 stones from the river there where the priest had been standing, and to carry them across with them. They get across and everything else, they stack them up, and they make an altar or monument and everything else for God and everything else, so it can be in remembrance from back. And as I said right there, there's roughly 40,000 fighting men that crossed at this time, as well as the women and children and everything else that came across. These rocks and everything were stacked up in a city called Gilgal. So there'll be a remembrance for those that came across. But we do remember that there's 2.5 tribe that will be back on the other side, but this will be a memorial for them as well. They'll remember that as well later on. In chapter 5, it goes into quite a few things. Because they're getting ready, they're coming into the land and everything else, they want to get back to the things living under the law. Well, one of the things is they were crossing the wilderness for 40 years. None of the male children or whatever else were being circumcised. So they took this right here, they came together and everything else, and all the males that had been traveling during that time, whatever else hadn't been circumcised, they were circumcised. And the reason that's important is because they were getting ready to celebrate Passover. Well, the men had to be circumcised for them to come up and to celebrate Passover according to their laws and everything at the time. So they observed the Passover. This is kind of important too. You got to remember what happened the day after the Passover. Manna quit falling. For the first time in 40 years, the Israelites were dependent upon the land that God gave them, the land of milk and honey here. So the day after and everything else, they started eating of the roasted corn and some of the other things that were available to them in the land. Well, this kind of goes back to us on, okay, God has provided for them yet again. They were complaining. How many times do you think they complained about having manna every day? They were not thankful how we are. We're not thankful for a lot of things. So God's given them something else here. They can live off the land now. The people were no longer on milk, as you want to call it. This is part of the maturing process. They were going to start eating the meat of the land. So this is a maturing process for them to come from depending on God to give them the food directly to it or whatever else, that they were going to have to step out and take it from what the land is there. And it shows them maturing in their faith that they're following him. At the same time here in chapter 5, as Joshua is sitting there and they're outside the city, Joshua has an encounter with a warrior. And he sits there and he goes up to him and he's basically asking, he said, art thou for us or for our adversaries? What Joshua was asking him. And the man answers, nay, I am the captain of the host of the Lord, and I have come. Joshua falls down and starts worshiping. He realizes this is an angel at this point in time right here. He also tells Joshua to take off his shoes. He's on holy ground. You know, you're walking into a strange country and you see a man standing from you and standing there with a sword or whatever else. You think he's ready to fight because he's got his sword out and extended and everything else. So you think he's fighting. When you come up to him and you realize it's an angel. Well, that's important because that's a sign to Joshua and all the people. It comes back where God told him he would be with him and that God would fight their battles for him. Here's just another sign that God is going to fulfill his word. He's going to fulfill his promises to him. I'm here. I'm sending this warrior to help battle with you. He's going to fight. He's here for the battle. He's going to help push you through and help you with the victories and stuff. And you are going to take this land, but it will be through my might and my power and not your own. uh, and stuff. So that carries through that right there. It's through chapter 5. And I'm just going to go through another couple of chapters and stuff here. Chapter 6, we get into Joshua, getting into the battles. They've crossed over now. And the first one, these two we're going to cover here are just shows different things for us. When they come to the city of Jericho, God tells them how to defeat them. He tells them to send the priest out with the ram horns and everything else with the Ark of Covenant. And they're going to, for 7 days, they're going to circle the city. The first 6 days, they're going to circle the city one time, blowing the horns. They're going to let the people inside of the city know what's going on, that we're here. They do that 6 days in a row. On the seventh day, they do it 6 times. But on the seventh time, as they come around and start blowing horns, whatever else, he tells all the men to shout. And when they shout, the walls come crumbling down. That shows them again and shows the people within the city, man could not make the whole city, the walls fall down around the city. God did it. He had the power to totally destroy all those walls. And the men, the Israelites, went in and destroyed them and everything else. So they were able to take the city without power. They weren't able to, on their own to storm the walls and to come into that whatever. God took care of that with them, for them and everything else. He put that there. Next thing here is showing that God's power, and they were obeyed. They did exactly what he did, so the victory came to them easily. But the next one is they go into the city of Ai. It was a smaller city. It should have been easier for them to take over. And so Joshua sends out some men to go spy on the city to see what it is. They come back and tell them it's a smaller, and think it's a lot weaker and everything else. So they can send 2,000 to 3,000 men out to overtake the city. So that's what they do and everything else. But there's one thing that's left out in between here. There was a man named Achan. I think I'm going to say his name right or whatever else. While they were pillaging and taking over the city of Jericho, he saw some silver. He saw some gold. He saw some fine raiment. So what does he do? He takes that upon himself. All the gold, the silver, the vessels of brass, and the vessels of iron and everything else were supposed to be held aside for God, for his treasury and for the things of the country and everything else. This man took it upon himself. He was selfish. What happens to us when we're selfish? We get in trouble, don't we? We have to do, there again, he's not following God. His sin here causes problem for them. As these 2,000 or 3,000 men go into the city of Ai, they go into the city and they start fighting and everything else. Well, they're losing. They get chased out of the city. And as they're chasing out of the city, they lose 36 men in the battle there coming out. Well, you say 36 out of 2,000 or 3,000 is not a big deal, but it is because they lost some men. That's not mentioned before that they lost men in these battles or anything else. Like I just said, they lost men. And it comes back, and Joshua said, talking to them, trying to figure out why this happened. And it's explained to him that Achan confesses that he stole, that he did exactly what Joshua told him that God said not to do, that all these things were. So every time Israel sins, they turn against God to do what God tells them not to do. There's consequences. It's consequences in our life. There's consequences for a kid when they don't do what their parent does. Well, God's our Father, right? There's consequences for us, and we don't listen and do what we're asked to do from God. So because he had done that, the judgment was against him that they take him, his family, and everything. I think it's to the valley of, I'm probably going to say it wrong, Achor, A-C-H-O-R. They take him, his family, all of his livestock, everything else, to this valley. They stone him to death. Then they burn them, burn the remains after they've stoned them to death, and then they cover them with huge piles of rock to be a reminder that they should not disobey God, that they should follow God, or this is the consequence that could happen when they do it. So they come back, and Joshua takes the whole lot of his men, his fighting men, and they go back and they easily overtake the city of Ai. And things, so they do that. They follow what God's telling them to do now. The sin has been confessed. There's been punishment for the sin, and they go in and take over the city just like God had told them, that they would just be able to walk in and take care of it and everything else. But there was huge, severe consequences for his sin. A lot of times somebody does something bad to us, we're saying, man, I wish they would really get it for what they did. But at the same time, when the finger's pointing the other way and we did something, oh no, God, please forgive me. It's all right if somebody else gets punished. We don't like it and we get punished. But because of Achan's sin, he got punished, and it was a sign for all of them. I am your God. I have done everything for you. I have provided this. This land is yours. You'll follow me, and you'll listen to me. Loyalty and everything else, they have to listen to God in order to do this. They have to obey, or there's going to be consequences. There's going to be things like there, something severe like that. There will be losses in battles. There will be lives lost. Whole families destroyed because of the sin. of one man there. So there's a lot of things that can happen. Excuse me, my voice is going. After Achan's sin and punishment came through, the battle was successful. So how Joshua won this war or whatever else, he completely surrounded the city with 30,000 men. He went in with 10,000 in through the city or whatever else, and as the battle began, they started retreating just like the previous group did. So he's using a failure in the past to bring a victory this time. So as all the warriors from the city followed them out, the other 30,000 came in and encompassed them and everything else and totally destroyed them, and they burnt the city to the ground. And everything else, as God had told them to utterly destroy it, to burn it down. They did exactly what they were supposed to do then. And that city was roughly 12,000 men and women that were destroyed because of this in this battle here. If the people, as I said here, if the people of Israel were supposed to inherit this land, they had to follow God and obey him in every single aspect of it. Not just partially. They had to obey every bit of it. Disobey, and there would be consequences, and sometimes severe. Jump over to, give me 1 second here, get my notes straightened up. We're going up to verse 9 here, and I'm just going to give a couple more verses, then we get into where there's personal land and everything else, and that's a little hard to talk about and discover because it gets a little bit boring, you know. It's like me trying to describe a map to you, and you don't see a picture of it. It's kind of hard to follow and know exactly which direction I'm going with it, right? Okay, in chapter 9, Gibeonites were fearful for their lives, so they try to deceive Joshua, pretend like they're people from another land. So they come to him dressed in old clothes, with moldy bread, and with empty wine flasks and everything else like there. So they think that they had been traveling a long way. So they come tell him they're like right there, and they sign a treaty with him. Well, what had God told them in Deuteronomy? We do not sign treaties or agreements or marry or anything else with these people of this other land. You are to drive them out. Well, Joshua and the leaders of the Israelites to take it upon themselves without going to God and decide to make a treaty with them and things. So this causes them a problem. There again, what happens when we take things upon ourselves and we don't involve God? Small things or the big things. We can sit there and look at it as well. You know, they did this, they did that, and everything else. We do the exact same thing in our lives. We don't go to God with the things we need to go to him all the time with and everything else. But there's consequences. He's fooled by this and everything else. And the leaders, nobody ever went to God and prayed about it and asked him for this and everything else. They did not destroy them or their city as they'd been required by God. But so what happens is when he found out he'd been fooled, he turns around and makes them all servants. Well, that leaves that, I think it's like 4 or 5 cities there or whatever else, and all the remnants survive. This is still part of the group that they were supposed to drive out and destroy, but now they're left in amongst them. Well, they're still part of the group that worshipped idols. They worshipped other gods. They worshipped stuff. They did as I said, or go sacrifices and the different things they did or whatever else. They left this group of people in them. Well, that's always going to come back and get you when you leave somebody like that with totally different beliefs or whatever else. Their beliefs are slowly going to work back in and come back and haunt them later on. We get into chapter 10, and there's a lot that goes on there. There's 5 Amorite kings because of everything they've heard that's going on. They decide to get together, so they're going to raise a huge army to come against Joshua and the Israelites. And so what happens, they come up and they go against the Gibeonites because they knew that they had formed a treaty with the Israelites and they knew they'd come. And that's what happens. Joshua comes and defends them in a huge battle. And here's where some of the other miracles come along. This is the battle here I'm talking about. This battle is huge. It's a massive battle, and it goes on and on. It's prolonged. And they finally start overcoming these armies, and they're chasing them away, and through Beth Horon and some other cities. And this is where God starts casting down the hailstones and starts killing the men from the enemies and stuff as they're traveling and traveling and traveling. Well, Joshua doesn't want to make the same mistake again. He doesn't want to let any survivors survive. So what's he do? He asks God to make the sun stand still until they could utterly destroy these enemies that are fleeing from them. So between the hailstones and them chasing them, and the sun and the moon stand still for almost 24 hours until the victory is won and they have utterly destroyed these people. So that's another miracle. Crossing the Red Sea, asking God, let the sun and the moon stand still so you can take a victory over your enemies and things. You know, that had never been done before in the Bible. It's not been asked or done again since then. How do you sit there and making these huge signs like this? I'm here with you. This also is another sign that man is not the victor here. God is the victor here. God kept that sun in its place and the moon in its place, so they'd have light in order to conquer their enemies and destroy them, to drive them out of the land, so he could give them exactly what he had promised to them before. In verse 11, it gets into another one that King Jabin of Hazor had gathered a great army to come against them as well. But God's telling Joshua again, be not afraid. Well, he's afraid of this group of this military here and everything else because they have lots of horses and chariots and everything else. But God tells them exactly what to do, that he's going to win this battle for them and everything else. So as they take them over and they kill the horses, they don't kill the horses and everything else, but they take them, what they call it, they huff them. They cut the tendons of the legs so they're not useful for military use or pulling things again. And then they sit there and they burn the chariots. God's given them the power and stuff he's walking through again. This is a great army that they were somewhat fearful of. He throws them down before them. They conquer them as well. So God is sitting there and taking care of them. In chapter 12, it just goes through the different kings that Moses had defeated on the other side of the Jordan River when they'd come through the first time many years earlier when he'd sent the spies in. And it comes back now and it goes over to 31 kings that Joshua defeated as they were taking over the land. As you go through this right here, that's a period of about 7 years. And I know there's things in there where they should not marry, they should not make treaties and stuff like that in Deuteronomy. It was sitting there for they're going to utterly destroy these people. How is that? Well, there again, like I said, they didn't destroy all these people in some of these cities, so there was inhabitants that they could have married and things with whatever else. But they didn't completely take over all the land. They didn't finish the job that God had given them. They didn't take over the whole land that he was promising them and stuff like that. He gave them land, but they did not fulfill that promise there. And we go through 13 through 22, and as I said, that gets into the division of the land. Joshua's getting rough, 87 to 90 years old here, and him and Eliezer start to portioning up the land to him and everything else. The inheritance on the east side of the river, Jordan is Reuben, Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh. And Caleb gets Hebron, an area there around the hill country around Hebron and everything, as his reward for his faithfulness. Remember, he was the one that came into the country with Joshua to be the spy and everything else. But he was always there. He was faithful to God and faithful to Joshua. So he got some land as part of this and there as well. These were set up as tribes. There were cities set up for refuge. And this is kind of hard. You know, if you were to spill innocent blood, this is a place you could go to hide out basically from families or somebody that wanted to come in for vengeance and stuff and things. So that was set up or whatever else. And Joshua came up with the cities like it there. And then the Levites weren't given land like all the tribes were or whatever else, but they were given cities that they could go in and set up worship centers and things of that nature right there for the Israelite country and things. And then we come to the conclusion here and everything. After these, verse 22, and all the battles and everything was taken over and the land was split up and everything else, the eastern tribes, the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh crossed back over and took over their land that they were promised back on the east side of the Jordan. The other tribes stayed on the west side of the Jordan there in Canaan where they had been promised. They had built an altar there on the side of Jordan, and the one group thought they were deciding that the ones that went across the east side, they're going to not follow God anymore. And so there was a dispute between them, and they got it worked out. The ones from the east side said, no, this is a tribute to God. We will still follow God. We just wanted some sign to be known from your side and our side that we are still planning on following God. It's funny how something so simple, something like right there, you're setting up an altar or whatever else could cause such a big issue with the people then and everything else because they thought they were going to turn. But I guess that's what they saw for 40 years. The people turning against God, turning against God, turning against God. So this is what the first thing that came to them. But Joshua's farewell charge was to him to obey the law, cling to Yahweh only, avoid intermarriage and idolatry with these other people that were still there. And it said that we will serve only Yahweh, that we will not serve any other gods. Basically what Moses told him before he passed and everything, he's telling them to go back and follow the covenant laws and to follow only Yahweh, to follow only one God. And this does go up and it covers Joshua's death and burial. And it goes back to where it talks about where Joseph's bones had been brought with them for the 40 years they traveled with him as well. And they gave him a burial spot. And Eliezer as well, his death, the high priest, he was the son of Aaron, and it goes into his death and carries on as well. So it covers a lot of things there from their trials, tribulations, and Eliezer was one of the last group, too, that came out of Egypt. So it was the end of a generation and things there of that. Hope I haven't bored you. I hope I didn't carry too much or go on too much water right there. like I said, it's a little harder to try to cover a whole book in the Bible when you're just trying to do this and everything else within a few minutes in spare time, whatever else.